Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Ajnana Niptimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Amriteshwariyai Namaha Om Amriteshwariyai Namaha Om Amriteshwariyai Namaha Om Amriteshwariyai Namaha. We'll begin with a short meditation. Kindly sit straight and make sure your vertebral column, your spinal column is erect. And slowly close your eyes. Try to breathe in and out a couple of times. And after doing so, feel the relaxation. And now we'll chant Om 3 times. And as we chant Om, imagine the sound of Om coming from deep within your navel area. And as you chant Om, imagine the reverberations of Om spreading to all parts of your body, your mind, making you more and more relaxed. Now kindly take a deep breath. Now feel the reverberations of Om in each and every part of your body and mind, and making it more and more relaxed. Slowly become aware of your breathing. Breathe normally but very consciously of each and every inhalation and exhalation that occurs through your body. And now as you breathe in, chant the mantra Ma silently along with your in-breath. Hold hold your breath for a few seconds. And then when you breathe out, chant Om. So Ma, when you breathe in, hold your breath. Then breathing out, Om. And continue like this for some time. Ma, hold your breath. Om. Ma. Om. Ma. Om. Slowly and slowly the reverberations of Ma and Om become more and more subtle. You can just feel the energy of Ma and Om as you breathe in and out. Feel the mind becoming completely relaxed and silent. Ma is a representation of divine love and Om of divine light. Imagine your heart to be filled with that divine love and light. And visualize your heart expanding, just like the vast sky or the ocean. Feeling the love for all beings. And now as we conclude, imagine a ray of light going out from your heart to all the beings in this world, just like the rays of the sun. And as the light falls on each and every one, imagine they also become more loving, more peaceful, more content, and more blissful. And while imagining so, let's chant the Loka Samasta prayer 9 times. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. 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 Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om Dhyayamo Dhulavagundanavatim Tejomayim Nashtikim Snigdha Pangavilokinim Bhagavatim Mandasmidashri Mukhim Valsalyamritavarshinim Sumadhuram Sankirtanalapinim Shamangi Madhusekta Suktim Amritanandatmikam Ishwarim. Om Narayanam Padmabhuvam Vasishtam Shaktim Chatatputram Parasharam Cha Vyasam Shugam Gaudapadam Mahandam Govinda Yogindram Adhasya Shishyam Sri Shankaracharyam Adhasya Padmabadam Cha Hastamalakam Cha Shishyam tam todakam vartika karyamanyan asmat gurun sandadamanadosmi. In the last session, we were looking at the great Asura, the demon, Vritra, fighting with Indra. As you know, for a recap, Vritra was created because of Indra killing the great saint Vishwarupa. And Vishwarupa was the one who had 3 heads, and because he was giving oblations during sacrifices to the gods, the human beings as well as the demons, Indra was angry, and so he cut off Vishwarupa's head, and because of which Twashta, his father, who was another great sage, became so angry that he created Vritra, the demon, or you can say the Asura. And Vritra actually fought with Indra first, and then he won the battle, and all of the gods ran away because he was not only defeating the army, but he was swallowing their weapons as well. And finally, Indra went and prayed to Lord Mahavishnu, and Lord Vishnu said to go to Dadichi and get his bones and make his famous weapon. So Dadichi, the thunderbolt, which is the Vajra Ayudha, and Dadichi gave up his body for that, and Indra made the weapon, the thunderbolt, that is the Vajra Ayudha, and he was facing Vritra in the battle, and now because of the power of Indra and the protection of Mahavishnu, he was winning, the gods were winning the battle. Because of which all the demons started fleeing, and Vritra was alone in the battlefield fighting with Indra. And so Vritra was sure that he was going to die. And he was ready to embrace death in the battle rather than to court victory as more meritorious courses. So Vritra rushed at Indra with his trident in his hand, and he whirled it powerfully, his trident, whose tip was as fiercely brilliant as the fire of cosmic dissolution, and threw it at Indra, yelling, "O death to you, O felon!" And unshaken by the sight of that weapon approaching through the sky like a planet or a brilliant meteor, Indra cut it with his thunderbolt weapon. Having innumerable joints, Sataparvana, that is called Sataparvana, that is which has many joints, and as also one of Vritra's arms, stout and fleshy like the body of the king of the serpents. So his Vritra's arms one of the arms were cut because through the Vajra Ayudha. But Vritra, bereft of one hand, charged furiously at Indra with an iron club in the remaining hand and struck at the cheek of Indra, the holder of the thunderbolt, and at his elephant vehicle, which is the Airavata. And hit in this way, the thunderbolt weapon fell from his hands of Indra. All the celestial hosts, devas, asuras, charanas, and siddhas acclaimed the wonderful skill of Vritra, but at the same time raised anxious cries at the predicament of Indra. Ashamed of himself, Indra hesitated to take up again the thunderbolt weapon that had fallen from his hand. So he knew that he was facing a very formidable but a very decent enemy also. You remember what Vritra was saying to Indra. He was being very spiritual at that time. And he said, all you want is to have the devotion in my next birth. All I want is to have devotion to the feet of the Lord. I don't want anything. I don't want to be the Lord of Rasatala, that is one of the, Patalas. And he said, I don't want to have anything except the devotion of the Lord. So, and not only that, he said to Indra that there are two ways to die. One is to leave the body in a yogic way, or the other one was to die in the battlefield fighting against your enemy and the enemy killing you. So, hearing all these things, Indra was so respectful of Vritra. He knew that he was not an ordinary enemy, ordinary person, or an ordinary asura. So, but Vritra, what happened was, as you fight and the weapon drops down, it's kind of, you are saying that you cannot fight anymore, and the enemy should not strike you if you don't have a weapon. So Vritra said, "O Indra, take your thunderbolt weapon and kill me, your enemy. This is not the time for regrets." So no warrior fighting with weapons can expect victory always and never defeat. The fortunes of war vary, except in the case of the infinite being, the master of creation, preservation, and dissolution. So this is what Vritra was saying. So a warrior cannot expect victory all the time. It can also be defeat. But it cannot be defeat all the time also, but it can be victory also. So it will come changing. And only one person can win all the time. Who is that? The Supreme Lord. So that's why in Bhagavad Gita says, that wherever Lord Krishna is, the victory will be there. So know that victory will be there. So the ultimate cause of the success and the failure of human effort is the Lord manifested as time, within whose net all the worlds and all their lords function in absolute subservience, like birds entangled in the fowler's net. The ignorant world, without knowing the Lord functioning as time, on whom the powers of the senses, mind, and body depend, who manifests as energy, life, death, and immortality, attribute success and failures to themselves, identifying with the physical body. So this is Vritra who's telling Indra. He's saying, what is the ultimate cause of success and failure? Which is the Lord manifested as time. So people do not understand that. That is Kala is nothing but that it is the Lord, the great Supreme Lord. And so without that, what they do, they are like birds entangled in the hunters or the fowler's net. And the ignorant world, without knowing, Lord is functioning as the time. And they think, what do they think? They believe the powers of their senses, mind, and the body. And they say, they don't understand that it is the time that manifests as energy, life, and death, and immortality. But without understanding this, they attribute the success and failures to themselves, which is the ego. Identifying, and what is the cause? Identification with the physical body or the mind. So he says, "Oh Indra." So just imagine this is a demon who is saying all this to Indra. And "Oh Indra, know that just a wooden doll figuring a woman or a mechanically worked animal, all creatures in this world are subject to the control of the Lord. Neither Prakriti or Purusha, nor the great element, Mahatatvas, nor egoity, that is Ahankara, nor elements, the Bhutas, nor senses, Indriyas, not one of them can project this universe without his grace and blessing." So he's saying just saying that Indra, know that, just like a wooden doll, which is mechanically worked, all creatures are subjected to the control of the Lord. And neither Prakriti means nature, nor Purusha means the absolute in that sense, nor the great elements, nor ego, that is Ahankara, nor the elements, nor the senses, not one of them can project this universe without his grace and blessing. So everything happens because of the Lord's blessings. And man, ignorant of this, considers his little self as master in himself. He is in truth only an instrument in the hands of the Lord. He makes him an instrument for procreating other beings and for destroying others too. So he's saying that, look, man is ignorant. And because of his little self, he thinks he is a master. So I was remembering this when I was reading these verses. Yesterday Amma was singing a beautiful bhajan. Icha mayam ninnicha polaleyo vishwathilengum nadapadamme. That is, Icha Mai means, one who creates everything through their icha, that is, desire. So everything happens in this world because of your desire or because of you. So he's saying this is the same principle that is being enunciated here also. He's saying ignorant man, because he considers as his own self as the master, he says he thinks he's doing everything by himself. Whereas we are only an instrument in the hands of the Lord. And then the human being thinks he's an instrument for procreating others, beings, as well as destroying others too. So he says when time is favorable, man is blessed with longevity, prosperity, fame, plenty, and the goodwill of all. And when the time is unfavorable, the opposite is the case, however much he may strive against it. So he's saying, what do you mean by time is favorable? When you are having a good time. And what do you mean by a good time? This is what we think that is a good time is good. And we say that when time is good, we have longevity, prosperity, fame, and all the other things. But when time is unfavorable, not good for us, we cannot, even if we strive, we cannot achieve anything. So what he says, therefore one should remain unperturbed in all situations, whether in fame or in disrepute, in success or in failure, or in life or in death. So that's a big thing that he's asking for, which we have to practice. So remain unperturbed when in all situations, whether it be fame, whether it be disrepute, whether it be success or failure or life or death, we should not be affected. And so Sattva, Rajas and Tamas and all their effects pertain to Prakriti alone and not to the Atman. And he is free from bondage who realizes that the Atman is only a witness of all the bodily and the mental transformations and is not involved in them. So he says, all these gunas, the qualities, sattva, sattvic quality, rajasic quality, and tamasic quality pertain only to prakriti, that is nature only, and not to the Atman. The Atman doesn't have any quality. It is free of all qualities. And he says he's free from bondage when he realizes that Atman is only the witness of all the bodily and mental transformations. So a person who is free is because how? He becomes a witness to all the bodily and mental transformations. O Indra, look at me, who though defeated and deprived of an arm and of weapons, am still standing facing you for battle, determined to do whatever I can to destroy you. This battle is a gamble, in which the stakes are the lives of the people, the arrows, the dice, and the vehicles of the fighters, the game board. No one knows who will be victorious or who will be defeated in it. So he says, look at me. I'm still fighting you, against you, and determined to destroy you. But this battlefield where I'm standing is like a game board. It's just a game of chess. And we don't know who is going to win or who is going to lose. So Sri Shuka said, Indra acclaimed these words of Vritra, free from any touch of hypocrisy. So it came from his heart. It came from Vritra's heart. And picking up the thunderbolt, and without being too much surprised at Vritra's attitude, he said smilingly, O Danava, Indra said, whoever has the outlook you have described has certainly attained to the great spiritual eminence. What a great good fortune it is that you have taken wholehearted refuge at the feet of the Lord, who is the universal friend and master of all beings. You have indeed transcended the world-deluding yogamaya of the Lord, for you have discarded your innate nature and attained to the state of an exalted sage. It is indeed most surprising that a person like you, who is endowed with the Rajoguna Prakriti, has developed firm and settled devotion for the worshipful Vasudeva, the embodiment of pure sattva and the Lord of all. So he's saying, O Vritra, that is O Danava. Danava means O demon. So whosoever has an outlook like you have described, they have reached the goal, their spiritual goal. And he's saying that what a good fortune is, somebody has made the Lord their universal friend and the master of all beings. And he said, you have transcended the yoga maya, which means you have realized. And because you have discarded your innate nature. And what state are you now? You are in the state of an exalted sage. And he's saying that it is surprising that, you are like a person, even though, all the demons are supposed to have the tamasic and the rajoguna, because you have transcended that. So, and become what? You have become worshipful to Vasudeva. And he says, what use is there for the dirty water of muddy pit for one who sports in the limitless ocean of bliss as a result of his having cultivated deep devotion for Vasudeva, the Lord of all and the bestower of liberation. So he's saying, why are you sitting here and fighting with me in this muddy water? Because you already have transcended and you have reached the ocean of bliss. So Sri Shuka said, thus exchanging thoughts on spiritual matters. So they are fighting, but they are exchanging spiritual matters only on the battlefield. The warrior leaders, Vritra and Indra of great prowess, fought on. O great king, Vritra, the suppressor of enemies, now whirled a destructive iron club and hurled it at Indra with his left arm. So his right arm was already chopped off. So it's with his left arm he's doing. And Indra thereupon cut with one stroke of his thunderbolt weapon of 100 joints both the club and Vritra's other arm, which was stout and strong like the trunk of an elephant. The Asura, with both his arms cut at their base and bleeding profusely due to Indra's stroke, looked like a mountain hurled down after its wings were cut. And possessed of a huge body and fangs resembling death itself, he looked as if he were going to swallow the three worlds. He moved like a mountain chief, causing tremors on hilltops and crushing the earth into powdery dust by the might of his strides. And opening his mouth so as to touch the heaven with the upper jaw and the earth with the lower one, he rushed at Indra, the wielder of thunderbolt, and swallowed him and his vehicle Airavata by his mouth, as wide as the sky, and the tongue resembling that of a serpent. So now what did he do? He just walked towards Indra and made himself so big, and he just swallowed Indra and his elephant, the Airavata, which was his vehicle. And great in strength and in powers, he swallowed Indra as a python swallows an elephant. Prajapatis, Maharshis, and the Devas raised a hue and cry and remained stunned at sorrow, because they thought Indra is now dead. Though swallowed by the Asura, Indra did not perish in his stomach, as he was protected by the Narayana Kavacha and his own yogic power. So Narayana Kavacha means the protection of the Narayana, Lord Vishnu. So he was wearing that, so he could not be touched. So because of his yogic power. And the resourceful Indra cut open the abdomen of Vritra by force. Emerging from the Asura's body, he cut off his head as if leveling the top of a mountain cliff. The thunderbolt weapon of tremendous speed whirled round and round the neck of Vritra for a period of 1 year, the time required for the sun to traverse through the zodiac, before it severed and hurled the head of Vritra at the appointed hour on the exhaustion of his prarabdha. Thereupon, kettle drums sounded in the heavens. The heavenly choir, consisting of Gandharvas, Siddhas, and Charanas, extolled Indra with the mantras highlighting the prowess he showed in the destruction of Vritra, and showered a profuse rain of flowers on him. O valiant king! All witnessed a spiritual effulgence emerging from Vritra's body and entering the realm that transcends all the manifested levels of existence. So, what happened? So, after Indra got inside the body of Vritra, he came out, and not only that, he chopped off Vritra's head with his thunderbolt weapon, the Vajrayudha. And what did the Vajrayudha do? It was whirling around his neck for 1 year. Why? Because his prarabdha was not over. So he could not die at that moment, so he had to die only after a year later. So, then there was all these festive sounds, all the the heavenly choir was singing, and all these things. Because why? Because Indra won the battle. And so I was remembering of a story which Amma said, if you remember that story, this about prarabdha. So one day, a man who knew how to read the prarabdha from in different people, and also the things, he was walking through the seashore where he found a human skeleton, skull. Just the skull, the head only. So when he looked at the skull, it was said that it had some more prarabdha left. So he was thinking, it's already a skull, it's dead, and the person is gone. And how can this have more prarabdha? So he wanted to know. So he took the skull and went home and kept it in his drawer. And every day he would open it, look at it, if there is any change, anything has happened or not. And it was a couple of months later, his wife started noticing that he's going into his bedroom secretly and pulling out the drawer and looking at things. So one day when he was not there, she went and she unlocked his drawer and he pulled it, and she saw the skull. And she started thinking, what is this guy doing every day? So she waited for a couple more weeks also. And every day he would go and look at it, examine very carefully. And so after 2 weeks later, she started thinking, oh, now I know what it is. It must have been the skull of his lover. And that's why he's so attached to it. And he's gazing at it for hours together and looking at it every day. So she got so angry one day, she took the skull and went and powdered it. So when he came back, he again opened the drawer and looked, and the skull was gone. So of course he knew who the culprit was. So he called his wife and said, what happened? So then the wife gave him whole thing. He said, I know it is your lover, and I know she has died, and even after she has died, you are keeping her skull and looking at it every day, enjoying it, and you don't love me, and all these things. So then he laughed and he said, oh, now I know. So the prarabdha, even the prarabdha, it is very difficult to go. That's why he's saying that for 1 year, the thunderbolt, the Vajrayudha, was going round the head of Vritra until his prarabdha was over. So what happened after that? He says, O valiant king, all witnessed a spiritual effulgence emerging from Vritra's body and entering the realm that transcends all the manifested levels of existence. So Vritra was actually a realized soul. So the moment he died, what happened? His Atman, his soul, merged with the infinite. So this is the story of Vritra. So what happened after this is, we can see that now Indra, who has done a lot of sins, is now having his confusion and has his feelings of guilt because he has killed a lot of people who are supposed to be very spiritual. So Sri Shuka said, O generous king, all in the three worlds felt freed from the woes and were filled with joy, with the sole exception of Indra. All the assembled devas, rishis, pitris, bhutas, asuras and gandharvas, besides Brahma, Parameshwara and Indra himself returned to their respective abodes. The Raja said, O sage, I am desirous to know why Indra failed to be happy. While all the other celestials were happy, why was Indra alone unhappy? Indra should have been happy because he killed Vritra, but instead of that he was unhappy. So Sri Shuka said, terrorized by the might of Vritra, all the devas and the Maharishis had appealed to Indra to destroy him. But Indra had been reluctant to do so because of the fear of Brahmahatya, the killing of, or the sin of, that you incur by killing a Brahmana. Brahmana means a Brahmin, a Brahmajnani. So Brahmana doesn't mean one who is born as a Brahmin. It means one who is a Brahma Jnani, that is one who knows Brahman. So he knew that Vritra was a Brahmana, not a demon, not an Asura. So that's why he was feeling so sad. Indra said, in order to help me, women, earth, water, and trees divided and appropriated amongst themselves the sin I derived from killing Vishwarupa. So what happened? So it's not only Vritra, but he also killed his own guru, Vishwarupa. So Sri Shuka said, hearing these words of Indra, the rishis said to him, "May good fortune befall you. We shall all help you to perform the Ashwamedha sacrifice." So we had seen that Ashwamedha sacrifice where the horse goes and then finally the sacrifice is conducted. Entertain no fear of the sin committed by you. And so if you adore the Supreme Being Narayana, the Lord and the Master of all, the soul of all souls, you'll be free from the sin of slaughtering even the whole world. So he says, so the sages said what? The rishis told him, you perform this Ashwamedha sacrifice. You remember why we are doing the pujas? So it's not to remove the sin. The sin will always be there. But when we do the puja, what happens? The guilt is gone. So if you adore the Supreme Being, Narayana, that's why he's saying, even if you slaughter the whole world, then no sins will be accrued. So this is what exactly Lord Krishna tells Arjuna also. Arjuna, you're not the doer. Right? All these people are already dead. I have killed them. We are only just doing an act of killing them, of who these people are already dead. So don't think that you are killing them. So similarly, he's saying, what are they saying? If you adore the Supreme Being Narayana, that doesn't mean that you can be so devotional and go and kill everybody. That's not the point. If you adore everybody, then what happens? If you are forced into that position where you had to kill people, then that sin does not fall on you, because you are doing it as a service, a seva, selflessly. But a true devotee does not kill anything, does not even hurt an insect. So don't think that if you become a devotee, you can kill anything. That's not the point. So you have to be very careful. You have that discrimination. And he says, by chanting whose names and excellences, even the killers of holy men, of cows, of their fathers, of their mothers, of their teacher, as also those who eat dog's flesh and are most degenerate, are purified by the devoted worship of him, the Supreme Being, by means of a horse sacrifice that we propose to perform. You will be unaffected by the sin of killing even all beings in this world, beings who are none but expressions of the Lord himself. What then to speak of the slaughter of this cruel one? So he says, even if you kill cows, if you kill holy men, their fathers, their mothers, their teacher. So, Parashurama killed his mother, right, at the behest of his father. And you think about his fathers. And so what happened? So if you do all these things, you'll be unaffected by the sin if you are devoted to the Supreme Being. So Sri Shuka continued, thus prompted by the rishis, Indra had killed Vritra, and now the sin of Brahmahatya overtook him. So because of killing of Vritra, now he says the Brahmahatya, that is killing of a Brahmana, of a realized being, overtook him. So he had to undergo very great suffering on account of this sin. For even virtue does not bring joy to one who has done something that makes him ashamed of himself and despicable in the eyes of others. So he saw Brahmahatya following him in the form of an old, shivering, outcast woman, infected with phthisis and wearing a blood-stained cloth. So he saw that this Brahmahatya, that is his whole sins, following him like an outcast woman, infected with all the wounds in the body and blood-stained cloth. She had grey, disheveled hair, and she was polluting the air everywhere with her breath, emitting the smell of rotten flesh. She followed Indra, calling out to him to stop. So this was Indra's imagery. O king, the 100-eyed Indra rushed through the sky and all the quarters without getting peace anywhere. At last, going in the northeastern direction, he took shelter in the Manasa lake. And resolving his mind on the ways of getting rid of the sin of Brahmahatya, he lived for 1,000 years in water, hiding in the delicate fiber within the stalk of a lotus flower, without the enjoyment he usually derived from the sacrificial offerings. For being hidden in water, fire, who's the conveyor of such offerings, could not reach him. So you can see, even though the rishis tell him that you do this sacrifice and you'll get rid of your sins, so he had to undergo the sin of doing that. So that's why what he did, he could not get rid of his guilt for 1,000 years. What he did, he went to the Manasa lake, hid in the lotus inside the lake, and so stalk of the lotus flower. And so what happened? So because he was hidden, the offerings could not reach him because the offerings came through fire. Usually when you do the yajna, the homa, what do you do? The offerings you offer in the fire. So fire is the transmitter of these offerings. But because of the water, he was hiding in the water, the fire could not come there. So during this period of Indra's absence, Nahusha, who was endowed with the strength born of meditation, austerity, and yoga, ruled over heaven. But when, out of infatuation resulting from the wealth and power, he made indecent advances to Indra's wife, he was reduced to the state of a serpent. So Nahusha was another character, one of the godly characters, and then what happened? He was ruling the heaven, and then because of his indecent advances to Indra's wife, who he was attracted to, he was reduced to a serpent. And in the meantime, the virulence of Indra's sin was mitigated by the influence of Rudra, the presiding deity of the region where Indra hid. And by the grace of the consort of Vishnu, that is Mahalakshmi. Where does Mahalakshmi dwell? In the lotus flower. So further purified by meditation on Mahavishnu, Indra was invited by the great Maharishis to return to the heavenly region. So after 1,000 years, he came back to the heavenly region. O scion of Bharata's house, the Brahma Rishis then came and made Indra perform a horse sacrifice in adoration for the Supreme Being. And when the horse sacrifice is the Ashwamedha Yaga. And when Indra, under the direction of the great Vedic scholars and ritualists, performed the Ashwamedha sacrifice in adoration of him who has assumed the forms of all the deities, that is the Devatas, the whole of the sin of Brahmahatya that had affected him dispersed like dew before the sun. So he did the Ashwamedha sacrifice and then he got rid of his Brahmahatya sin. Thus, by that horse sacrifice conducted by the great rishis like Marichi, according to the rules of the ritualistic code in adoration of the Supreme Being, the bestower of the fruits of all actions, Indra became cleansed of all his sins. So this narrative concerning the victory and the redemption of Indra obliterates the sin of those who hear it. As it extols the Lord and describes the doing of his devotees, it enhances devotion in those hearing it. Let people read it in time and after time, and especially hear it read on days considered holy. Wise men will derive from the study of it a great strengthening of their faculties, as also prosperity, fame, longevity, and freedom from sins and enemies. It will bring them all that is auspicious. So he's saying, what happens if you read this? What will happen? So he's saying that, as I said earlier, there is this Phalasruti, means what you get out of reading this. So he's saying that it will bring devotion. It will enhance devotion. And not only that, what else? Wise men will derive a great strength of their faculties. And prosperity, fame, longevity. So these are all common things when you read all these things. How will you do that? Because you will stop killing, first of all. Then you become more dharmic. So because of this, you will naturally have more prosperity, more fame, and more longevity. So this is where we stop with the story of Vritra. Now there is a natural question by Raja Parikshit. Imagine, so you understand what was going, who was telling the story to whom. So it was Lord Shuka, the great sage Shuka, who was telling the story to Parikshit, narrating the story. So Parikshit has a natural question. Oh, illumined one. So how did this Vritra, that is this demon, whose nature was rooted in Rajas and Tamas, and was very sinful, obtain such devotion for the worshipful Narayana, the inner pervader of all beings? This is a natural question. Right? Usually demons are what? Demons are having that disposition to being tamasic and being rajasic. And what do? They eat a lot, they sleep a lot, and they kill a lot. So this is what they do. But in this case of this particular demon, Vritra, who is supposed to have rajas and tamas, and who is supposed to be very sinful, why did he have so much of devotion to Lord Narayana, to the Lord? So even in Devas, he says, Parikshit says, even in Devas who are endowed with the quality of Sattva, and in great rishis who have attained purity of mind, this kind of unalloyed devotion is not found. So, how do you get devotion? By doing so much of tapas, austerities. And when you say a deva, what does this mean? Deva means a person who has the qualities of more predominant qualities of sattva. So, who has a very sattvic quality. So, even in that person, and even in great sages, rishis, who have attained to purity of mind, you cannot see this kind of devotion. So, where did Vritra get it from? And not only that, remember, Vritra was also realized. And he says, living beings are countless in this world like grains of sand. And among them all, in the human species, there are a few here, and there are who aspire and strive for spiritual development. And O Holy One, even among them, still fewer are aspirants for mukti, liberation. And among such aspirants, only a very limited number succeed in abandoning earth and home and realizing the Atman. So, he's saying, O great soul, among a crore of such liberated and spiritually illumined beings, again persons who have perfect equipoise and single-hearted ecstatic love for Narayana are extremely rare. And how then did this Vritra, a sinful oppressor of all the worlds, come to have such firm devotion for Krishna, the existence, knowledge, bliss absolute, even when engaged in a fierce battle? So this is a natural question. And he's beautifully explaining these things. So there are millions and millions of living beings on this world. And so he's saying like the grains of sand. So can you count, you just take a handful of sand and can you count the grains in that? So like that, there are millions, countless in this world. But amongst them, in the human species, there are only a few who aspire and strive for spiritual development. So there is only few people out of those millions, maybe 100,000 of them who will aspire and strive for spiritual development. And even amongst them, these 100,000, there are only a few who will aspire for mukti, that is for liberation. So out of this 100,000, there will be 1,000. And out of this 1,000, what happens? There is only a very limited number succeed in abandoning earth and home and realizing the Atman. So out of this 100, what happens? The 1,000, there are 100,000 who are aspiring spiritual people. Out of this, there will be 1,000 people who will aspire for liberation. And out of these thousands, there will be only 100 people who will abandon their homes and going in search of the Atman and realizing the Atman. And he says, among a crore of such liberated and spiritually illumined beings, again, persons who have perfect equipoise and single-hearted ecstatic love for Narayana are extremely rare. So even amongst them, one who has ecstatic love for Narayana, of the Supreme Lord, is extremely rare. You can find maybe 1 or 2 people. So how did this Vritra, this sinful oppressor of all the worlds, come to have such a firm devotion for Krishna? The existence, that is Sat, knowledge, Chit, and bliss, that is Ananda, absolute. So Sat, Chit, Ananda, absolute, even when engaged in a fierce battle. So you think about, when he's describing this, think about the rarest and the rarest of opportunities that we have to be with Amma. So he's saying, even if you are a spiritual aspirant, how many of you can have the ability to think about mukti without liberation? There are many people who will be so nice, who have the spiritual aspirations, but they don't want mukti. They don't want liberation. So that's why you see that many people who are very nice and who are spiritual will come to Amma. But the moment they see Amma, they will run away. Why? Because, many people want a God who will not talk to them or tell them what to do and what not to do. The moment the God starts talking, they will run away. Because they are afraid to do what really God wants them to do. So if you want to have liberation, then you have to go to the Guru, surrender to the Guru and obey the Guru. Then only you will become a disciple. A Shishya means one who is, who is eligible to be disciplined. That is a Shishya. So that Shishya, the number of Shishya is very less. And amongst them, how many will gain liberation or have such kind of a devotion? It's not like devotion, just ordinary devotion where you go to the temple and offer, your coconuts and all these things. But even if you do it selflessly, but the ecstatic love, the love that, in one sense we can say that Amma shows us. And, actually that symbolizes that Amma's love for the Lord. Like when she goes in ecstasy, when she's singing bhajans, or when she's meditating, sometimes she goes into ecstasy. How many people will have that? So, but he's saying, this Vritra, who was a demon, how did he have that? So he says, we have great, O revered sir, is asking Shuka. We have great doubt in this matter and we are therefore very much desirous of having a true understanding of it. This Vritra won the admiration of Indra by his prowess. His resignation to the Lord could not therefore have been caused by fear. So he's saying, even Indra adored Vritra. Why? Because of what he said. And it's not because of fear. If it was a fear, the moment Indra cut one of his arms, he should have run away. But he was just sitting there and fighting. So he says, so he did not run away. And his devotion to the Lord was not because, oh Lord, save my soul, save my body and help me from this Indra. He was dying very valiantly. And he did not care about his body. And he did not call upon the God for saving his body or saving himself. So that's why Indra was so impressed. And it was not out of fear. And Suta said, Sri Shuka, the son of Badarayana, on hearing these sincere and earnest words of Parikshit, praised him for putting such a question and began to answer it. So why? When you go to a great sage like Amma, a great saint like Amma, what should you ask? You should ask the proper questions. Not, can I get married next year? Or can I get 2 cars? And, can I change my boss? Now, of course, I won't find fault with doing it because Amma is like that. Amma is also like your mother. You can ask anything you want. But usually when you go to a great sage or a saint like Amma, what questions should you ask? You should ask the most appropriate questions, which are spiritual questions. Then only you will get what is correct from them. Then only they will become gurus, real guru. So here, Shuka, when he heard this that question, is so, with so much of discernment and with thirst. And the question was coming from his heart also. When he asked that question, Parikshit asked that question, how did Vritra get this much of devotion? Where did he get it from? So that was the most appropriate question. So we'll see the answer to it next session. Om Amriteshwari Namah. धन्य धन्ये जननी जगन्मयी ब्रह्मवादिनी चिन्मयी सन्मयी। धन्य धन्ये जननी जगन्मयी ब्रह्मवादिनी चिन्मयी सन्मयी। അമ്മേ നിൻ പദപത്മ പരാഗമൻ കർമ്മമാലിന്യം എല്ലാം ഒഴിക്കണേ. അമ്മേ നിൻ പദപത്മ പരാഗമൻ കർമ്മമാലിന്യമെല്ലാം ഒഴിക്കണേ. ധന്യ ധന്യേ ജനനി ജഗന്മയീ ബ്രഹ്മവാദിനി ചിന്മയീ സന്മയീ. കണ്ണുകൾക്കെന്തൊരാനന്ദമംബികേ മുന്നിൽ മിന്നുമീ ദിവ്യരൂപാമൃതം. ശർമ്മദേ ശുഭേ ശാരദേ ശ്യാമളേ സർവമംഗളേ പാഹി മാം പാഹി മാം. ധന്യ ധന്യേ ജനനി ജഗന്മയീ ബ്രഹ്മവാദിനി ചിന്മയീ സന്മയീ. വാളെടുക്കിലും കരുണാമയി കൈതൊഴ ധന്യ ധന്യേ ജനനി ജഗന്മയീ ബ്രഹ്മവാദിനി ചിന്മയീ സന്മയീ കാലകാലപ്രിയതമേ നിർമ്മലേ കാമദേ ദേവി സർവമന്ത്രാത്മികേ കാലിടറുമ്പോൾ ഉൾക്കരുത്തേകിയൻ മാലകറ്റണി മാതാമൃതേശ്വരീ മാലകറ്റണി മാതാമൃതേശ്വരീ മാലകറ്റണി മാതാമൃതേശ്വരീ മാലകറ്റണി മാതാമൃതേശ്വരീ. വിഘ്നനായക സിദ്ധിവിനായക മംഗളമൂർത്തി സ്വാമി മംഗളമൂർത്തി സ്വാമി സിദ്ധിവിനായക മംഗളമൂർത്തി സ്വാമി മംഗളമൂർത്തി സ്വാമി വരദ വിനായക നമോ നമഃ ഗണാധീശതു ഗുണാധീശതു വരദ വിനായക നമോ നമഃ ഹേ ഗിരിജാത്മജ ബുദ്ധിപ്രദായക വിഘ്നേശ്വര ജയ സങ്കടനാശക സുഖ करता तू दुख हरता तू विश्वविनायक नमो नमः सुख करता तू विश्वविनायक वरद विनायक नमो नमः
गणाधीशतु गुणाधीशतु वरद विनायक नमो नमः
हे चिंतामणि शुभ फलदायक बल्लाळेश्वर जय विश्वेश्वर सन्मदिदायक नमो नमः लम्बोदर तु सर्वेश्वर तु सन्मदिदायक नमो नमः गणाधीश तु गुणाधीश तु वरद विनायक नमो नमः
गणाधीश तु गुणाधीश तु वरद विनायक नमो नमः
गुणाधीशतु वरद विनायक नमो नमः
गणाधीशतु गुणाधीशतु वरद विनायक नमो नमः
हे महागणपति पाप विनाशक गणेश्वर जय विघ्न विनाशक वरद विनायक नमो नमः
गणाधीशतु गुणाधीशतु 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 वरद विनायक नमो नमः
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 कुछ न ले आया तू कुछ न ले जाएगा, नाम हरि का जब ले संग वही आएगा।
कुछ न ले आया तू कुछ न ले जाएगा, नाम हरि का जब ले संग वही आएगा।
कुछ न ले आया तू कुछ न ले जाएगा, नाम हरि का जब ले संग वही आएगा। हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल, हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल,
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल, हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल,
हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल।
होगा क्या कल ये न तुझको खबर है, कुछ दिनों की है रे जीवन सफर है।
होगा क्या कल ये न तुझको खबर है, कुछ दिनों का है जीवन सफर है।
होगा क्या कल ये न तुझको खबर है, कुछ दिनों की है रे जीवन सफर है।
होगा क्या कल ये न तुझको खबर है, कुछ दिनों का है जीवन सफर है।
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल,
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल,
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल,
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल।
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल।
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल।
सुख में सब साथ रहे, दुख में न कोई रे, अपने से बढ़कर न प्रेम कर कोई रे।
में सब साथ है, दुख में न कोई रे, अपने से बढ़कर न प्रेम करे कोई रे।
सुख में सब साथ रहे, दुख में न कोई रे, अपने से बढ़कर न प्रेम कर कोई रे।
सुख में सब साथ है, दुख में न कोई रे, अपने से बढ़कर न प्रेम करे कोई रे।
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल,
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल,
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल,
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल।
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल।
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल।
कुछ न ले आया तू कुछ न ले जाएगा, नाम हरि का जब ले संग वही आएगा।
चले आया तो कुछ चले जाएगा, नाम हरि का जब ले संग वही आएगा।
कुछ न ले आया तू कुछ न ले जाएगा, नाम हरि का जब ले संग वही आएगा।
चले आया तो कुछ चले जाएगा, नाम हरि का जब ले संग वही आएगा।
नाम हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल।
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल।
होगा क्या कल ये न तुझको खबर है, कुछ दिनों की है रे जीवन सफर है।
होगा क्या कल ये न तुझको खबर है, कुछ दिनों का है जीवन सफर है।
सुख में सब साथ रहे, दुख में न कोई रे, अपने से बढ़कर न प्रेम कर कोई रे।
सुख में सब साथ है, दुख में न कोई रे, अपने से बढ़कर न प्रेम करे कोई रे।
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल,
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल,
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल,
समय न गवा तू
हरि हरि बोल।
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल।
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल।
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल
हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि
ദേവി ശരണം ദുർഗേ ശരണം കാളി ശരണം ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം 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 ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ദേവി ശരണം ദുർഗേ ശരണം കാളി ശരണം ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം 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 ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ദേവി ശരണം ദുർഗേ ശരണം കാളി ശരണം ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം 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 ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ദേവി ശരണം ദുർഗേ ശരണം കാളി ശരണം ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം 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 ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
കമലേ വിമലേ കരുണാനിലയേ കമലേ കലയേ കലിമല ശമനെ ശിവരമണി ഗുഹജനനി മഹിതേ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
കമലേ വിമലേ കരുണാനിലയേ കമലേ കലയേ കലിമല ശമനെ ശിവരമണി ഗുഹജനനി മഹിതേ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശിവരമണി ഗുഹജനനി മഹിതേ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശിവരമണി ഗുഹജനനി മഹിതേ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ദേവി ശരണം
ദേവി ശരണം
ദുർഗേ ശരണം
ദുർഗേ ശരണം
കാളി ശരണം
കാളി ശരണം
ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം
ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം
ശരണം ശരണം ശരണം ശരണം
ശരണം
ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ ശുഭദേ സുഖദേ ശിവപദനിലയേ ഗിരിജേ വനജേ ഗിരിരാജസുദേ ശുഭവരദേ ഹൃദജനനി സുമുഖി ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശുഭദേ സുഭദേ ശിവപദനിലയേ ഗിരിജേ വനജേ ഗിരിരാജസുദേ ശുഭവരദേ ഹൃദജനനി സുമുഖി ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശുഭവരദേ ഹൃദജനനി സുമുഖി ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശുഭവരദേ ഹൃദജനനി സുമുഖി ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ദേവി ശരണം
ദേവി ശരണം
കാളി ശരണം
കാളി ശരണം
ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം
ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം
ശരണം ശരണം ശരണം ശരണം
ശരണം ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
രസികേ രമണീ രിപുകുല ഭയദേ ലസിതേ ലളിതേ ശ്രുതി പദനിലയേ സ്മരണം സതതം തവ പദകമലം ശരണം ജഗദംബ
രസികേ രമണീ രിപുകുല ഭയദേ ലസിതേ ലളിതേ ശ്രുതി പദനിലയേ സ്മരണം സതതം തവ പദകമലം ശരണം ജഗദംബ
സ്മരണം സതതം തവ പദകമലം സ്മരണം ജഗദംബ
സ്മരണം സതതം തവ പദകമലം ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ദേവി ശരണം
ദേവി ശരണം
ദുർഗേ ശരണം
ദുർഗേ ശരണം
കാളി ശരണം
കാളി ശരണം
ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം
ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം 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 ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ദേവി ശരണം ദുർഗേ ശരണം കാളി ശരണം ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം 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 ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ദേവി ശരണം ദുർഗേ ശരണം കാളി ശരണം ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം 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 ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
അമലേ വിമലേ കരുണാനിലയേ കമലേ കലയേ കലിമല ശമനെ ശിവരമണി ഗുഹജനനി മഹിതേ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
കമലേ വിമലേ കരുണാനിലയേ കമലേ കലയേ കലിമല ശമനേ ശിവരമണി ഗുഹജനനി മഹിതേ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശുഭദേ സുഖദേ ശിവപദനിലയേ ഗിരിജേ വനജേ ഗിരിരാജസുദേ ശുഭവരദേ ശ്രീജനനി സുമുഖി ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശുഭദേ സുഭദേ ശിവപദനിലയേ ഗിരിജേ വനജേ ഗിരിരാജസുദേ ശുഭവരദേ ഹൃദജനനി സുമുഖി ശരണം ജഗദംബ
രസികേ രമണീ രിപുകുല ഭയദേ ലസിതേ ലളിതേ ശ്രുതി പദനിലയേ സ്മരണം സതതം തവ പദകമലം ശരണം ജഗദംബ
രസികേ രമണീ രിപുകുല ഭയദേ ലസിതേ ലളിതേ ശ്രുതി പദനിലയേ സ്മരണം സതതം തവ പദകമലം ശരണം ജഗദംബ
സ്മരണം സതതം തവ പദകമലം ശരണം ജഗദംബ
സ്മരണം സതതം തവ പദകമലം ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ദേവി ശരണം
ദേവി ശരണം
ദുർഗേ ശരണം
ദുർഗേ ശരണം
കാളി ശരണം
കാളി ശരണം
ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം
ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം
ശരണം ശരണം
ശരണം ശരണം ശരണം ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
കാളി ശരണം ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം 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 ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശരണം ദുർഗേ ശരണം കാളി ശരണം ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം 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 ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ദേവി ശരണം ദുർഗേ ശരണം കാളി ശരണം ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം 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 ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശരണം ദുർഗേ ശരണം കാളി ശരണം ലക്ഷ്മി ശരണം 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 ജഗദംബ ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശരണം ജഗദംബ
ശരണം ജഗദംബ
അമൃതേശ്വരി മംഗളം പ്രണമദാ മുക്തിപ്രദേ മംഗളം ഭുവനേശ്വരി മംഗളം സുഹൃദിനാ ഏകാശ്രയേ മംഗളം അമൃതേശ്വരി മംഗളം പ്രണമദാ മുക്തിപ്രദേ മംഗളം ഭുവനേശ്വരി മംഗളം സുഹൃദിനാ ഏകാശ്രയേ മംഗളം ഹൃദയേശ്വരി മംഗളം ഹൃദിലസത്തേജോമയീ മംഗളം മൃദുഭാഷിണീ മംഗളം വിജയദാ പ്രേമാകൃതേ മംഗളം വിജയദാ പ്രേമാകൃതേ മംഗളം വിജയദാ പ്രേമാകൃതേ മംഗളം മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി സകലാഗമ നിഗമാദിഷു ചരിതേ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി നിഖിലമയ ജനനീ വന്ദേ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി പ്രേമരസാമൃത വശിനി മാതന അമൃതാനന്ദമയി പ്രേമഭക്തി സദായിനി മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി സമഗമദായിനി മനോലയകാരിണി അമൃതാനന്ദമയി സദനം മമ ഹൃദി വസദാ ദേവി അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി പതിതോദ്ധാര നിരന്തര ഹൃദയേ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി പരമഹംസപദനിലയേ ദേവി അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി ഹേ ജനനി ജനി മരണ നിവാരിണി അമൃതാനന്ദമയി ഹേ ഹൃദജന പരിപാലിനി ജയദ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി സുരജന ഭോജിത ജയ ജഗദംബ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി സഹജ സമാധിഷു ധന്യേ ദേവി അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി ഓം ജയ ജയ ജനനീ വന്ദേ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മംഗളാരതി മാതാ ഭവാനി അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി മാതാ അമൃതാനന്ദമയി जय बोलो सद्गुरु माता अमृतानंदमयी देवी की असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय ओम शांति 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 ओम लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु ओम